Okay, let us see. Let me tell you just a little bit about me. I was married for 20 years. As my husband and I were going through therapy, we went to 5 therapists in an effort to save our marriage. We have 6 sons. We were seriously interested in saving our marriage. We did not want to get a divorce. And all I can say is 2 of the therapists we went to, now this was in the late 70s, 2 of the therapists we went to were really good and 2 of them were awful. And none of them really knew anything about couple counseling. Actually, who did at that point in time? Couple counseling is a really new area, and it's a area that I think is only in the last 10 years has actually come to the foreground. The 5th therapist that we went to, after much money and much time and much frustration, actually gave us permission to get divorced. And I realized I needed permission. And so I took it. And about 6 years later, I found out that this therapist himself was getting married for the 5th time. And I was angry. I was angry at myself for having to have needed permission. I was angry at him for not telling me that he had been married 4 times before. And I was angry at the model that I was using with couples, because in the beginning in the 80s and in the mid-80s, I think those of you who were in the field realized that there was a surge of divorces. So I said it was the mid-80s that more women started leaving their husbands and waiting for their husbands to leave them. So it really balanced out. We had a lot of divorces. And I was single at the time, and one of the things that I heard continually was, why did I pick the mate that I did? And then over and over again, the same type. And of course I was sitting there, and I had gotten out of a relationship with my husband and back into a relationship with a man who was very much like him. So I had to ask myself the same question, and I was angry that I didn't know the answer, and I kept telling them, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And so I started at that particular point in time going to New York and going to workshops, and my friend Lenore Heck, who ran the Gestalt Institute of New York, and I were talking one day, and I said, Lenore, give me a good IRS deductible reason to come to New York regularly. And she said, oh, well, she said, you can teach for me. And I said, oh, great. Well, what do you want me to teach? She said, well, teach what you want. And I said, well, what do you need? She said, well, what I need is somebody to teach couple therapy. Do you know anything about couple therapy? And I said, no, but I'll learn. And I always remember what Richard Bandler had told me, that if you really want to learn about a subject, schedule a workshop on it and teach it, because it's concentrated research. So I started teaching couple counseling. And because I did, I started paying attention. I also started in New Orleans teaching classes for singles. And one of the churches hired me to do all-day workshops for how to meet people. And at the after lunch, I had a little segment called Flirting 101. And people, singles, would come in and they repeatedly say, let's skip all the stuff in the morning and get right to Flirting 101. And as a result of my doing that, I started teaching the flirting class, and I signed a contract with Richard Bandler to write a book on flirting. And so I started designing couples workshops where I would bring couples in, and I'd bring actually I was working with singles, I'd bring singles in and I'd have them form a couple within the first half an hour of the workshop. And it was fascinating to me. I was watching people do what it is that they had done in their life that they were complaining about, because all of the participants in the workshop were clients of mine and I knew their history. And how? And I thought, oh, well, they've got too much data when people introduce themselves and they, you know, share a little bit. And so I cut down on the time, and I had the next workshop, I had them pair up after 10 minutes. And it was the same. And then I went in and I just said, okay, look around the room. I had nobody tell anybody their name. Nobody said anything except hi. And I had them pair up, and it was the most phenomenal aha. How, based on really no conscious information other than looking at someone and seeing how they moved around and maybe hearing the sound of their voice, they had recreated the mating. And all of a sudden I was no longer interested in the flirting part, which I call the attraction pattern. I was interested in the selection pattern. And I began to notice that in the workshops, and I'd take them through an accelerated relationship, and that some of them were staying with the partner that they had selected even though they didn't like the selection, and some of them had rejected a partner that they liked. It was the most confusing thing. I couldn't understand. And so then I began studying the interactional patterns. And one morning, after trying to figure it out, I woke up, was sitting in my bed, and I didn't dream it. I don't know where it came from. All of a sudden, I just knew. I got up, and I took the information to the office, and I had my clients fill in what I now refer to as the selection test, and have moved to call a psychogenetic profile. But the selection test was a series of 8 questions. So I'm going to invite you, without further ado, or my explaining any more to you, if you will fill this out. Now, it's a diagram, and I suggest that you fill it out on the paper itself. On the back of the paper is instructions, which I don't want you to read, so I'm going to increase your stress just a little bit. Don't read the instructions. What you get on the front